What it is, what it was, what it shall be. We're back again. Today's video, Spirit War Boot Camp number 110. This is entitled The Black Pill is the White Pill. How's everyone doing? Of course, we're continuing on our previous video. We're going to cover some of the same ground. But let's define our terms as usual. Black pill is the white pill. So what is black pill? Black pill is often also referred to as a doomer mentality, right? The mentality that everything's fucked. The evil arcs have the world on total lockdown, right? And that there's no hope for anything, and that everything that happens is bad, right? And so this is a compelling worldview for a variety of reasons. Like, you could provide a lot of solid evidence and, experiential data to show the black pill mentality as the truth. And that's one of the reasons actually why the black pill is the white pill, is because basically you can use reality to justify either viewpoint. So by contrast, let's look at the white pill. So the white pill is like naive sort of optimism that believes that, everything's fine and that everything's good. The white hats are in control. Patriots are in control, right? This is a lot of people's worldview. And again, there's you can provide evidence based on real world events and real world data that shows the white pill viewpoint. And so that's why I'm saying the black pill is the white pill. But we'll get to that justification in the long run. But let's start, and we're connecting the previous video to today's video. So in the previous video, I was talking a lot about two-ball cane, 007, and stuff like that. And this goes back to the concepts and ideas that there's a continuous ideological thread that's going back at least to the 1500s, dealing with John Dee and his Enochian angelic workings that later becomes what we now call the Rosicrucians, the Freemasonic orders, and so on. And the idea that this thread of ideology going back from the ancient world and the Book of Enoch through the medieval era, Templars, the Rosicrucians, and John Dee, right, coming up into the Masonic orders, and to today we have what's called the accelerationists, right, the transhumanists, and so on, and that this is really kind of a continuation of this exact same worldview. And so particularly the concept of hyperstition I view as a total thread of continuity, right? So the idea being that, of course, John Dee created his Enochian corpus and the Rosicrucian and Freemasonic orders, and that was continued by his immediate disciple, Francis Bacon, and of course people like Aubrey de Vere, right? And so you have the kind of de Vere thesis and the Baconian thesis that the real this is my view, this is the view that I seem to have come to based on the available evidence, is that there was actually a group, or a coterie, if you will, of these people that surrounded Francis Bacon, and that were all students or Bacon adjacents at the Gray's Inn, which is the law school, and what we now call the Bar Association. All comes back to this thing called Temple Bar in the inner city of London, which, like the Vatican and like the Washington DC, is a state within a state, right? It's not subject to the same sort of territorial laws that are in the country that theoretically surrounds it, in this case Great Britain surrounding the inner city of London, and just as the Vatican City is a independent city-state within the nationality of Italy that we think of, right? And so this coterie of people, if you will, that are existing in this kind of stateless way, right? They're in this kind of hierarchical structure that's above the plebeians and so on. And like de Vere and so on were highly educated, right? The most educated people in the society. And his father, de Vere's father, his adoptive father rather, was basically, one of these classical Greek tragedians, and had basically supported on his estate a group of, dramatists, if you will. If you ever seen that movie, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, based on the play by Tom Stoppard. Excellent book and an excellent play, and that gives away a lot of what we're talking about today, is the concept of a play within a play. And this is very relevant. And if we're going to go back to this whole Masonic secret society thematic, we have this thing called the Royal Order of Jesters, right? So to put that in perspective, if you reach the third degree of Master Mason within the Blue Lodge Masonic Order, then you can become these other different types, like a Scottish Rite Mason, and then you go to the top of that, you become a 33rd degree Scottish Rite. Then you can become what's called a Shriner. And then if you reach the top tier of Shrinerism, right, then you can become what's called a jester, from the Royal Order of Jesters. And so, you know, they've of course been implicated in, just like Epstein and the Masons and all this other stuff, they've been implicated in a lot of underage and, you know, interstate sex trafficking and a lot of charity fraud, where they funnel this money that's given to them as this charitable shrine or organization building hospitals for burn victims and stuff like that. Of course, they don't really use them, use most of the money for what their benevolent outer thing is, but they have this, you know, I don't know how often it happens, but they have this big gathering of all the ROJs, which is the top order of the Shriners, which is the top order of the Scottish Rite, which is the top order of the Freemasons, and so on. So it's like this nested thing, but they have this convocation they call the Book of the Play. And there's a lot of implication that the connection there being going back to this pre-Masonic Rosicrucian order that created all the plays of William Shakespeare. And there's actually a DuckTales cartoon that goes quite into detail about all of this. And it got them to give a nod and tip of the hat to the Baconian thesis and the idea that what we're calling the foundation stone of the modern English language, like, wouldn't really exist without, because at that time, like, the courtiers that were surrounding the throne, you know, these what do you call them, Saxe-Coburg-Goethas, and these King George III, Hanoverian German royalty, right? So they spoke German, and a lot of the royals and the court people at that time spoke French, because English wasn't considered like a real language back then. And so in comes Francis Bacon, John Dee, and all these guys to legitimize the English language and to create the plays of Shakespeare as more or less like a syntactic sort of cryptographical codex for the modern English language. And as we know, John Dee, of course, being obsessed with Trithemius and people like that, and these cryptographers. And so a lot of people argue that this Enochian working and all this, what became the Masonic order, is really just an occult blind for spycraft and, you know, creating cryptography to pass secret messages with, and signing them 007 instead of signing them John Dee and so on like that. So now you get the idea that these people are taking these older Greek tragedies and recasting them into the English language, English alphabet, and, you know, using these ancient Greek tragedies about, you know, Troilus and Cressida and Antony and Cleopatra and all these different things that these old books are about, or Midsummer Night's Dream, dealing with Oberon, the king of the fairies, who is really Aubrey de Vere and his pedo cult, right there. And they're talking right in the play about these Greeks, Pyramus and Thisbe and all these types of people, Oberon and Titania, these mythical figures. But what they're really describing is the pedo cult of Aubrey de Vere, and Oberon becomes Aubrey and so on like that, right? So they're describing their pedo cult and their methodology. They're describing how they drug people and make them do bestiality with a donkey or something like that, right? And of course, this is going back to Apuleius and the whole myth of the initiation into Isis. And Apuleius becomes a donkey. He gets turned into a donkey by the witch Isis, right, with her magic power, turns him into a donkey in order to initiate him into this cult. And of course, in that play, Midsummer Night's Dream, you have this guy Bottom, right, who gets turned into a donkey, and then you have this woman that's cast under a spell, and they put this witchy herbs in her eyes to make her fall in love with the donkey, right? So this is, of course, some heinous ass shit. But what we're seeing here is that this line that gets blurred between classical drama becoming reality. So you write a play, you write a script for what you want to happen, and through the Trojan horse of fiction, right? You put on this play, and even in the, you know, in Hamlet and stuff like that, we see the play within the play, and we see how people can use drama and this drama that they're putting on to kind of say without saying, right? They're letting the royalty class know, they're letting, you know, the king know that they are onto his schemes. They know what he actually did, kind of, I know what you did last summer type of thing, right? And so you're putting it out in front of them in such a way where you're not saying it directly, but you're letting them know through this fictional thing. And when they see that their guilty conscience is going to go without you directly accusing them, they're going to be like, oh, this is a little hitting too close to home, right? And so you could argue that when you see these Shakespeare plays, what they're really giving you is kind of like an MK Ultra programming script, like how they talk about how, you know, Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz are used as these programming scripts that they use for trauma-based mind control. And same thing would apply to like these Shakespearean plays. And they use those plays and they put people into the place, kind of just like that book, The Magus, where this guy puts someone into a fictional scenario, you know, where their whole environment is being controlled and they think they're undergoing some kind of traumatic events, but really the whole thing was set up and orchestrated like a book of the play, like a programming script before they ever got involved, right? So it's artificial, right? It's constructed, it's a contrivance, if you will. And so then, you know, so you have these you know, Rosicrucian Freemasonic types creating the Shakespeare plays and creating the King James Bible, arguably the greatest mind control script that's ever been created and propagated through the world, right? Now controlling the destiny of millions of people that are all, you know, strapping their boots on and going out to war to die for the so-called Holy Land and the scapegoat tribe, right? Millions of people are willing to all go die in the Crusades in World War I and World War II to foster this kind of Zionist Masonic, you know, rebuilding the Temple of Solomon in the Middle East as the great master builder, right? So this is a big script and millions of people are willing to fight and die for that. And so you fast forward from the Templars and the Masons, and then you fast forward to the modern types of groups like, you know, even people like L. Ron Hubbard, right? Like he said when he was creating Scientology and Dianetics, right? Like he said that the greatest possible magical act is to write a book, to write so-called science fiction. And of course, you know, Jack Parsons and all these guys that are following in the footsteps of Crowley, right? They're obsessed with sci-fi and science fiction, and they're taking the fiction of rocketry and trip to the moon and putting it into and making it transform into these real world things where they're building rockets and space shuttles based on this fictional bullshit that happened. Much like, you know, in the World War II era, you have Bulwer Lytton calling about Vril, the coming race, and you have the whole Nazi ideology of the master race coming out of this Theosophical Society / Masonic fraternity. And so their fictional bullshit that they put out later becomes the premise and the acting script for World War II. So you can see the great power of this. And same thing would go for the Crusades. Like you make up this fable about the Holy Land and the Temple of Solomon, which we know never existed. When people go to Israel and they pray to the Wailing Wall, that's Herod's temple. That's not Solomon's temple. There's no historical, not even one iota or one scintilla of evidence that King Solomon ever existed or that he ever built it. Why is there no remnants or remains? You know, we got remains of Roman temples and Greek temples and the Great Pyramids, and we got all these Egyptian temples. Where's one little block of Solomon's temple? Where's one little engraving that ever gives historicity to Jesus Christ or Solomon or any of these fucking retarded Masonic scripts, programming scripts? There's zero historical evidence for any of it, and quite the contrary, there's a plethora of historical evidence that none of that shit ever happened, right? There's tons of writers from the 1st century AD who are, you know, even Josephus' History of the Jews, right? Like there's in any of that, there's no reference or no credible non-redacted, non-fabricated, inserted evidence interpolated into the text. Like there's nothing there to indicate. And quite the contrary, if you look at the history of the Etruscans and the Romans and the Babylonians and the you know, Dionysian Bacchanalia type stuff and all the Egyptian stuff, you'll see that literally every single thing in this Masonic textbook that we call the Bible comes from other cultures. They just stole it and just slightly altered the names from Ishtar to Esther or from Marduk to Mordecai and so on. Like it's an obvious, you know, screw job. It's an obvious fiction. But the point is that I'm trying to say, dealing with hyperstition, is that fiction can create reality and can serve for the blueprint of reality. And so in modern times, you have hyperstition. So these chaos magicians, Peter Carroll and Robert Anton Wilson and all the Discordians and all that, like they're talking the same exact thing. And they're showing you how you can take fiction and use it as a blueprint for reality. And of course, Michael Aquino, colonel in the U.S. military, did the same thing. Like he took the Cthulhu mythos and basically was creating rituals around this so-called fictional, fictional books by H.P. Lovecraft, and used that as a basis of his initiatory order. So again, he's creating a script. He's getting people to act out the script and take real world actions based on this fictional script. And then, and so they call this, the chaos magicians call this hyperstition. And of course, now you have modern stuff called the accelerationism, transhumanism, all these people surrounding Peter Thiel and all these guys, Elon Musk, and these accelerationists really believe in hyperstition. So the process of going from fiction into reality, right? And so now this is where I'm getting to the thesis that I'm calling black pill is the white pill. So how does that calculate? How do I say that? Why do I say that? Because the black pill is this theory that there's an evil cabal of wicked ass people that have snow jobbed the reality of the entire world. They have the whole world of normies and NPCs believing in fictional bullshit like left versus right politics. Like there's zero evidence that there's any kind of real left versus right divide. When it comes to the important shit like transhumanism, Zionism, everybody is competing over each other, crawling over each other to become King Rat and to betray America to the same Zioshil. And same thing is true about alternative media, right? Like you got so-called fake self-described Mason Candace Owens fighting, obvious Zioshil Erica Kirk, lifetime Mossad operative, child trafficking, co-conspirator and so on, who both of her parents are working for the military industrial complex and are arguably have been photographed, the France fees, right? Were both photographed with Michael and Lilith Aquino, right? So what's up with that? Like people just pass over that completely. But my point is just to say both sides of the scripted false dialectic, right? The Boaz and Joaquin Freemasonic black and white tiles and north and south pillars of Solomon's temple, so-called, right? It's a false dichotomy. And this goes back to the philosophy of German idealism, right? That the whole Bavarian Illuminati and the Masonic orders is based on this concept of the dialectic, right? You create two false dichotomy extremes, left and right, up and down, Christians versus Satanists, and so on like that. But they're both doing a pincer movement to trap everybody in the middle and make them choose a side. And then they get the sides to fight. It's like in Halo. I don't know if anyone ever played the original, like Halo 2 or whatever. They had this thing called King of the Hill. And so the master move to get the double kill is you wait for two people to fight and they both almost die. And then you come in and grenade both of them and you get the double kill. And that's the classic dialectic strategy that's employed by all. And they explain everything. They tell you right what they're doing right to your face, right? So how does this go from black pill to white pill? Well, this is one simple way, is the idea that they're operating based on fiction. So they just create it out of nothing and they implement it. And so reality is like this mirroring phenomena where you can take something internal to your consciousness, a spontaneous human creation of which we all have the potential to cultivate and develop our own creativity and to create scenarios and to script our own lives, right? So the same power that these evil arcs are using to control the world, you can use any day and any time. Right? And the thing is, if you look at these people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, these people are literal fucktards. They're so stupid and they're so uncreative and unoriginal. And just like, all these dudes who wrote the Shakespeare plays at Gray's Inn, right? They're copying older Greek sources. And then John Dee is copying the Book of Enoch. And then the Masons are copying John Dee. And then the modern chaos magicians are copying that. And they're just going all around in this circle jerk, just like you see all these people on social media, all these so-called influencers that they're just vibing off each other. They're just taking each other's unsourced bullshit narrative and amplifying it within the circle jerk of this like self-licking ice cream cone of the influencer community. And they fight each other to get credibility. Because if you were to just look at any one of them and you'd be like, man, this guy's obviously a shill. Look at all the stuff, the wellness company and all these pills and the methylene blue and all this bullshit that they're pushing out there like these commodities. And you know, whatever it is, they're always, all the influencers are either advertising for the wellness company for some kind of gold bullion IRA, right? They all advertise the same shit. And by pretending to fight each other, that gives them legitimacy in the eyes of the NPC pseudo red pilled people out there. Like, they just get a prefabricated thing. It's low effort, right? The controllers know that everybody's hella lazy and they don't like creativity. They fear creativity. So my point is to say, if these fucktards like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, who are obviously of a very low intelligence, they're morally corrupt, they're not able to really innovate or create, and they're all following the same script. It's not like any one of them is truly innovating or an individual. It's like, oh, you got ChatGPT versus OpenAI. Well, both of those fucking suck. Those are both super shitty platforms, and that's why they're going bankrupt, both of them. And now you're bringing in Apple into the mix, and so they create, again, this false dichotomy. So my point is to say, the black pill worldview, that all these wicked people are controlling the world through bullshit, that's really true. But by the same token, if you accept that as a fact, you could do exactly the same thing. Those people aren't smarter than you, right? They're not more creative than you. They're obviously a very low intellect. And again, the wicked hive mind of all these secret society people, all they can do is really recycle. Like, they take older stories and they just repackage it in a modern context to rope people into it. And so the point is, the adversary, they're kind of stupid. And they're kind of extremely predictable. And the only people that they really have power over is all the tarred NPCs that are lazy and uncreative. So their whole arm, it's like when you see the zombie movies, like, the zombies aren't physically powerful. They're not smart. They're not creative. They're not strategically wise to come up with all these kind of strategic gambits and stuff. They're stupid, but there's just 1 million of them. So anybody, like, you know, with a chainsaw or with a flamethrower or with a sawed-off shotgun could take out, you know, as many zombies as they have bullets. Like, they're not strategically viable, you know. So why do I take the white pill worldview, and why do I say that, you know, the black pill is the white pill, which is what we're in right now? It's a construct. It's fabricated, and it's very low res, right? And so what that function does is, everyone who's here in this earthly plane is either here because they're opting in at some level, okay? They haven't reached the level of sophistication where they're able to question the narrative and question the nature of the reality in which they exist. Either that, or they're having a fun time. So they're finding a way to make this simulosphere, if you will, this false scripted reality. They're finding a way to have fun here. You know, they found a little side quest that's entertaining for them and engaging for them. And so they're here. They're still here playing the game, right? And so these traumatic experiences that we have in life and all these hardships that we go through, it's testing us, and it's saying to us, like, how much do I have to show you before you wake up and question this reality and be like, there's something fundamentally unsatisfactory about this reality. Like, it's not truly convincing. And like, all the tards are in charge. It's like that show Charles in Charge, but it's tards in charge, you know? Like, I can remember back when I was 17, like, I didn't have all the shit figured out that I have now. I didn't have the data set that I have now, but I had this powerful suspicion when I was in high school. And I was like, it was my senior year in high school, and it was coming up to graduation, and they're giving me all these forms and being like, don't you want to spend $200 to get this graduation robe? Like, a super uncomfortable, impractical piece of clothing that you could never ever reuse, but they want you to pay $200 for it. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, this is supposed to be the sign. This is like the proof that I'm intelligent now and I've graduated high school. The proof is that I'm going to go pay $200 for an uncomfortable, impractical piece of clothing to go wear out in the summer in this big ass robe that's going to make you sweat and be super uncomfortable in the middle of June, living in the desert like I did, especially at that time. And I was like, how is this a sign of intelligence? It's the opposite. Same thing for class rings. I don't know if anybody is from my generation and remembers Jostens. Like, they would send around to all the high schools. They have this big Jostens catalog where you could look at your class ring, and they have all these different tiers. Like, they have the poor people tiers, and they have the fancy ones. And the fanciest one was like the South Dakota black gold, or they called it all this stuff. And I thought about it, and I was like, You're going to spend hundreds of dollars on this class ring with all your little vain, egotistical bullshit on it about what you did when you were in high school, assuming that you actually did something, right? So you're going to have this class ring. And then I thought about it, and I realized, I was like, man, anyone who's wearing their high school class ring beyond age 18 or 19, everyone's going to think of that person as a fucking retard whose best days of their life is already behind them at age 19. Everyone's going to think about what a fucking loser. And you just spent this $200 on a ring that you're going to be embarrassed to wear in 2 years. So I was looking at that and I was like, this is fucking retarded. And even though, I was in the honors program and whatever like that, and I, was getting good grades, and I was getting academic decathlon gold medals in science and all these different things. And I was like, this is fucking retarded. And I never went to my graduation. I was like, you can fucking mail that shit to me. I'm not going to go stand out in the sun and pay $200 for a robe and wear a little, Masonic fucking mortarboard square, black square of Saturn with a little tassel on it to be part of your Masonic initiation ceremony. Like, I didn't have those terms for it at the time, but I knew, I was suspicious. I was like, this is fucking retarded. And I'm not going to go along to get along and fit in with all these fucking retards being Masonically inducted into the slave cult of fucking blockheads. I was like, no, thank you. I'm not going to do that. I have no desire to do that. You know what I mean? So a lot of us have this innate type of suspicion. And the concept like that, all this circumstance, the pomp and circumstance that we see all around us, it's a big theater play, and it's a bait that only catches retards and people that are so uncreative and so afraid to be an individual that they'll just go in conformity and they'll do all this dumb stuff and pay hundreds of dollars for something that they're never ever going to use. And to me, if you assent to that, if you give your consent to that and you go along with that, that's like one more step up the fucking hierarchy of retardation that you're going to get into. But the point is, anybody can opt out of that. Like, I didn't know about the Masonic orders very much at that time. I didn't know any of the things that I know now about how this whole world is a scripted farce to catch retards and keep them in jail and keep them getting siphoned off for their loosh and their money and their labor and all their time and their youth to be siphoned away and traded in for some type of currency that really isn't even worth anything. And that you could, like, for that $250 class ring that you bought when you were 17, like, you could take that to the pawn shop when you're 18 and you might be able to get like $5 for it. You know what I mean? So it's a depreciating asset, the compliance. So if all these fucktards like Peter Thiel can go out there and create some fictional script about transhumanism and Elon going to Mars and all that bullshit, if they can get off and get over doing that, and they can make billions and trillions of dollars and, live in their fake world that they live in, where everyone secretly hates them behind their back and has direct experiential evidence that they're fucking retarded and that they're just a front man doing an agenda for someone behind the scenes and these other string pullers. Like, if that's really how it is, like, you can opt out of that and you could create your own reality, and you could use the exact same methodology that they're all using. And if you're intelligent and creative, you actually will have a better understanding of how to apply all these methodologies and how to create a superior form of reality that's compelling to people. And that happens all the time. Like, we see all these cultural formations and people, like, I see people online that could basically create a whole cartoon series with just a laptop and a shitty like MS Paint app, and they create a hilarious cartoon or a hilarious movie that millions of people will see and enjoy. And they didn't have to go, give oral service to the, Hasidic fucking mafia that runs Hollywood to become famous. They didn't have to put on a dress, dress up like a woman, like Robin Williams or like any of these guys that sells out to the Book of the Play and the Royal Order of Jesters. Like, they didn't have to sell out to any of that. And due to their innate creativity and sense of personal freedom, they're able to not just sidestep that, but to do so in an easy, fun way. And we can all do that. And the same thing that people would look at as a black pill reality, which is like, oh, we live in a construct, we live in a simulation. Well, it's like, cool, that's fun. Let's work with it. Let's create something. Let's create a simulacrum of our choice. where we're at the peak of the pyramid, where we have all the resources and creativity, where we're having a good time, where other people pick up our lead if they choose and opt into our script of bliss, fun time, living in a Edenic reality of total bliss, you know, total paradise on earth, right? There's nothing privileging the black pill reality. Like, you can use the exact same dynamic that built the black pill reality to create the white pill reality, but you have to know what they know, which is that we exist in a realm of ideas. We exist not in a material realm. Why do they spend so much time and so much energy and resources trying to program everyone into delusional materialism? And that's the thing, all their resources and all the money and time and all the effort that they put into brainwashing everybody and the mass media, like, I don't consider myself that exceptional, but none of that ever worked on me. I mean, maybe it did when I was like a teenager or something, a little kid. Like, I really thought G.I. Joe was cool or something like that. You know what I mean? But at a point, like, you question it. It doesn't take that much intelligence to realize that it's kind of shitty and it's kind of unimaginative and fun. And like, at any point where everyone around you is doing the same fucking thing, like, you get the idea that, hey, why is everyone doing the same thing? That's not fun. That's not original. That's not surprising and creative. Like, what else? What else is out there? And so that's how you get into the white pill reality. And you take the weapons that were forged against you by the evil arcs and the archons of the simulation. Like, you take their exact tools and the exact refuse and all the leftovers and all the scraps that were left by their super inefficient engineering of a false simulation. Like, there's so much waste, fraud, and abuse in their system. Like, you could pick up all the leftovers and build an abundant reality for yourself. And that's what I suggest. And that's what I'm trying to do, connecting the dots in this video to show you the lineage of how it's been the same story over and over and over again. And the same people that the black pill thinkers will look at and be like, oh no, these evil arcs have so much power, blah, blah, blah. And they're running this and that, and they're running everything, and their simulation is all embracing. Well, all that may be true, but look at them. They're not ultra competent, okay? They're mediocre at best. And the closer you look at them, you realize they're just order followers, and they're just imitators and frontmen that are just passing on something that was given to them by someone else. So you don't have to do that. You can opt out of that. You can convert the black pill reality into the white pill reality and realize that we exist in a world of creative freedom. And so you can flex that. And if you watch these videos, I'm going to continue providing more evidence and more schematics of something that you can take and improvise with on your own to create a blissful white-pilled reality for yourself that you can live inside and create, and you can use it to enhance your personal capacity. You can recognize that you can turn yourself into a higher version and a more hyper-competent version of yourself, and you can have your reality begin to correspond to this blissful reality that you envision in your internal worlds. And you can use the exact same methodologies, tactics, techniques, and protocols that the evil arcs are using to create a blissful, hyper-realistic, beautiful reality for yourself that you can exist inside, and it's shareable, so you can find people that vibe to your creation and that can participate in it with you. And so this has been Spirit War 110. The black pill is the white pill. Stay tuned for more. Hope to see you soon.